I love having plenty of flowers all over the place, not just to look at, but also to cut for the house. Eliot, aren't you glad you let me put some in the vegetable garden this year?
Well, you can't eat them, but they sure are pretty, and they attract lots of bees for pollination.
They sure do.
I'm Eliot Coleman.
And I'm Barbara Damrosch. And if you'll stay with us for the next half hour, we'll show you a lot of ways to have plenty of flowers for cutting.
On Gardening Naturally.
The best way to have a continuous supply of flowers for the house is to have a nice perennial garden filled with long-stemmed specimens like this purple coneflower. It doesn't have to be a huge garden. Just have nice big clumps of each thing so that you can pick a few without diminishing the display. Or pick from the back of the clump where you'll never miss them. Or if a flower flops over, pick that one and put it in a bouquet. The reason I like the perennials is that they keep going over a long period of time, from spring all the way up till fall. And the picture is always changing. Each bouquet is appropriate to that season. I start off my flower cutting in the spring. Here in my little herb garden, I've got some fragrant hyacinths. Here's a nice pink one growing in among my red leaf lettuce. And I always manage to have some grape hyacinths because they lend such a nice blue note to a bouquet. Get a few of those. None of these have very long stems, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches at the most. But it's a nice little bouquet to put next to a bedside table. Really perfumes the room. If I really want it to be fragrant, I'll put in a few of these little narcissus. This is a nice old-fashioned kind called Thalia. It's very fragrant. This will look pretty. But if I want some big bunches of flowers for the house, I'll go over to the daffodils and tulips that I've got planted across the lawn. Come on, I'll show you. When I planned this flower border, I planted a lot of tulips and daffodils in the back so that they could bloom before the perennials in front of them get tall and block the view of them. I also had a very specific color scheme in mind. I love to combine oranges and pinks and salmons and apricots with a little pink and yellow and white. So that's what I've done with this combination here. This is a really flamboyant tulip, sort of a dark salmon color with yellow and orange on the sides. That'll be the strong color. And this tulip is strong too, but it's just a salmony pink. I think that blends very well. Cut a few of those. Now, for subtlety, let's take some of these daffodils. This has a beautiful pale apricot center. This is going to pick up the salmon and the tulips. And over here, there's a tulip that's very, very soft apricot with some salmon in the center and little green streaks on the sides. And that'll tone it down just a bit. And then for some real pizzazz, I always like to grow this old-fashioned King Alfred. This is what everybody thinks of as the classic yellow daffodil. Get a bunch of those in there. And look how all of those go together. I think that's going to be just as pretty on the table as it is in this garden. I always look forward to late June in the garden because that's when all my lupins start blooming. Some of them grow wild around here, too. It's also a time when so many pretty wildflowers are growing in the fields out behind the house. We've got these beautiful buttercups blooming, some red clover, plenty of white oxeye daisies, and our native blue flag iris. You know, interestingly enough, the only flower in this bucket that's a true native is the blue iris. The rest are European escapes that came over with the early settlers. I'm also going to add some cultivated flowers to this bouquet. Since it's such a long-stemmed bunch, I think I could pick some of these long-stemmed catnip for a nice lavender blue touch. Put a few of those. And over here is a plant that I've only been growing for a few years now, but I've come to love this dark red color. It's Nautia, and it's another long-stemmed beauty. Doesn't mind being cut. It'll just produce some more flowers. Maybe put one or two of those in. And I have a lot to look forward to because in a few days, these coral bells will be blooming, and I can add those to bunches. Oh, and probably next week, I'll have a bed full of peonies as well. In August, there's so many things to pick from in the garden. I often start out with a background plant, like the silvery-leaved artemisia, soft and gray and subtle, and it'll be a nice foil for the brighter things that I'm picking. For instance, this phlox called Starfire, which is a vivid red. Now, I see something I think would go well with that, and I'm going to pick from the bottom, in the back of the clump here, some of these nice purple bee balms, several flowers to a stem. I think those will be interesting. And while we're in the purple mode, here's some cone flowers. Again, some floppy ones down here in the back where it won't make any difference, but I'm cutting them. And I love that because it has those reddish-orange centers. Okay, so we're going to inject a note of red-orange. Let's be really vibrant and go in the back of this helenium clump. Oh, yes. Sort of dark mahogany color. How's that? That's vivid. Okay, I think we need a softer accent, and I see a white spike here that would be just the right accent. This is a tall, late-blooming Veronica called Icicle. Look at that, nice long stem. Get a few of those in there. And that's about it, except that I do see this red bee balm, and it's almost finished blooming, but I see one beauty. Big red scarlet one that I can put right in the center. There. That'll look wonderful. And as the season goes on, we're not finished yet. There's going to be some fall things opening up, like the sedum over here. It's just starting to bloom pink. And over there, there's some asters that are going to be glowing with color along with chrysanthemums and the fall leaves. Now, there's another way to have a cutting garden, too. Let's say you wanted masses and masses of flowers, enough to decorate your church or all your friends' weddings or something like that. The way to do that would be to plant a lot of annuals. You won't get such a long season from spring all the way past frost, the way you do with a succession of perennials, but you'll get an awful lot of flowers all at once in the summertime. Now, the best way to do that, aside from sprinkling them in among your perennials, is to have a cutting garden that's out just as a cutting garden in a place where you can grow them in rows. How about the vegetable garden? Let's call a spade a spade. This is a garden spade.
And this is a shovel. And the difference between a spade and a shovel is in the angle at which the blade is attached to the handle and the shape, the curve of the blade. This is meant for digging in the earth in such a way as to remove material, so the angle of the blade allows you to hold material here, and the curve keeps it in. It's also a shovel, even though it has a flat blade, just like the spade, because of the curve and the angle. Again, this is meant for moving loose material.
When I work in the garden, I usually have both of them around. For instance, if I'm digging a hole to plant a shrub or a tree, I'll use the shovel because I'm removing a lot of earth. But I'll keep this spade handy. Whenever I encounter a root, I'm going to want to cut it. And this is great for that. I'll reach up above my head and go plump like that, and it'll cut it. I also use that technique if I'm making an edge between a flower bed and a lawn. See what a nice edge that makes? Go along in a line. Works great.
But watch out for your toes. Whenever you're using any tool to cut with, even a shovel or a spade, it wants to be sharp and the blade wants to be in good shape. And you notice this blade has a ding in it here, a bend. I must have hit it on a rock last time I used it. And any time you use that, that's going to be making extra friction and life isn't going to be as pleasant. So take a hammer, lay it down on a flat surface, and just tap lightly against it to take the ding out. Then, as I said, they want to be sharp. There may be a few rough edges there. I'll just take out this folding diamond file and make sure that I do have a good, sharp tool. Because remember, you're pressing this into the earth or through sod, and it really is a cutting tool and wants to be sharp.
This bright bower of color is a cutting garden that Eliot and I planted last spring in the vegetable area. Now, the way this works is that the rows are running east to west, facing south on a gentle slope. Now, I'm going to put the tall flowers in the back and then go down to the slightly less tall, medium height, short. Not for ornamental reasons, the way I do in my flower gardens, but just so they'll all get some sun as it's passing across the southern part of the sky.
Your tallest ones are already up, Barbara.
Well, they sure are. Look at that sunflower germination.
Yeah, and they're just about the right spacing, although I would probably take out every other one.
So they're
Give
each
'em
a
room to
foot
grow.
apart.
Yeah,
Right.
not bad.
Now, these will be taller than I am. The next row down, I thought we'd put some cosmos here, Eliot.
How tall does that get?
Well, these will probably get 4 feet.
Here, let me have those, and I'll space them out.
Okay, good. And I'll be thinking about what to put in the next row down from that. I have some tall zinnias here, but I think maybe these snapdragons will be even taller. So, Eliot, let's put the snapdragons next. And those could probably go in 2 rows as well.
They get pretty tall. How about 3 rows?
I don't think so, because I'm going to pinch the growing tips of these. Let's do that before we plant them.
Okay.
And that will make them get bushier. And if they're bushier, I think 2 rows will do it. Maybe about a foot apart.
A foot apart. You got it.
How about that? I might put them a little further apart in the flower garden, but in a cutting garden, I put cut flowers quite close together. And that seems to get the best production. Okay, now we're ready for these zinnias. And these can go even closer together. I think, again, we will pitch the growing tips to make them bushy. When I'm setting out annual plants, a lot of them need to be pinched back to make sure that they don't get too leggy. Now, this little zinnia is formed a nice flower bud in the center, but I'm going to sacrifice that flower bud and pinch the whole thing back like that. Now, that might seem a hard thing to do, to sacrifice part of a plant, especially a part that's about to burst into flower, but you'll be glad you did it. Look at these marigolds that I pinched back a couple of weeks ago. You can see where that stalk was, the center stalk. And look at all the side branches and the buds that have resulted. There's now 4 flower buds where there would have only been 1. I sometimes do that with perennial plants, too, the ones that bloom late in the season, like asters and chrysanthemums. I'll pinch them back early, up until about the 4th of July, and then they'll get bushier by the time they're ready for bloom.
This broccoli plant is the vegetable garden equivalent of pinching back. Once I've cut the main head, that stimulates all these side shoots to form. And basically, broccoli is nothing more than a bunch of flower buds. You take away the main one, and others come. This is a variety called Emperor, which are particularly good at making side shoots, and thus extending the broccoli season for many, many weeks.
In the back of the garden here, we planted some tall cosmos. These are just great. They just keep blooming all summer long. I like to cut a spray of them with several flowers on them. I also like to have some of these humongous zinnias. This particular variety is Sunbow Mix. Look at the size of that. It'd be a great focal point for a bouquet. I had a lot of nice tall snapdragons, whites and a bronze color, and some of these pale pinks, but they're kind of going by now. And these larkspurs, too, are a little bit at the end of the season, but still a few to cut. This nice tall pink one is still good, and I love this purple type. Really enjoyed having those. Now, here's something I just tried this year called basket flower. The flower is really unique. Look at that fuzzy lavender flower. Might give that a try. Now, I always like to have some sunflowers for cutting. Sometimes you want a great big bouquet to stick in a fireplace that's not being used, or in the corner on top of a table. So I grow some of these big tall ones. But have you ever tried the dwarf sunflowers? Here's a row of them, several different kinds. This one is called Music Box, and it has an interesting ray arrangement there with a dark maroon circle. Or this one, this is really one of my favorites. This is called Italian White, and it's a subtle yellow, so that I can get that sunflower effect in a bouquet, but not such a bright yellow, if that's what I want. This spider flower has been interesting. It's kind of at the end of its blooming period right now, but it's very interesting the way it blooms. It opens in the center here, moving gradually up this stem, leaving seed pods behind. It's a great flower. Now over here, this has been my best discovery of the season, Verbena bonariensis. It has these tall, leggy stems with all the foliage at the bottom. So it towers over the garden, attracting bees like crazy, and it looks so nice in arrangements that I think I've put one in every bouquet I've done this season so far. Now this garden changes somewhat over the season. Some of the early things have already gone by, the Iceland poppies and the toadflax, and this Gadesha, just a few blossoms of this left, but it was great before. Now here's a late blooming flower that is really worth waiting for. This is called Tithonia, or Mexican sunflower. Normally these grow very, very tall. You could almost use them as a hedge. But I like to grow these dwarf varieties that grow maybe 2.5 feet tall. Isn't that an intense orange? That's good if you like really bright, fiery arrangements. If you want a more subtle, romantic, old-fashioned look, though, you might grow this late-blooming Althea zebrina, which is sort of a little small hollyhock. Or this blue lace flower. This is really one of my favorites. Just this nice little cap of pale blue. Isn't that neat? And a very similar one, the Scabiosa, which has several different flower colors, all of them great. Like this pale lavender blue here, or this dark red. Here's a nice lavender. Comes in white too. And maybe best of all, this one that's such a dark purple, it's almost black. I also like to grow some flowers that work both as cutting flowers and drying flowers, like this lovely little Amelia here, or this Salvia viridis, or these straw flowers, also called helichrysum. And I always have a nice big bed of statice in shades of blue and purple. Notice I've staked these, but I haven't taken care to make that attractive. This isn't a display garden, it's a crop. Now here are two plants that I use as foliage accents or fillers. They're also good both fresh or dry. A Chinese herb. And here's a really interesting little plant called Bells of Ireland. Flower arrangers love this. You want to pull off the leaves to expose these little bells like that. And those will eventually dry to a papery consistency. So plant those if you have some room for them. But if you only have room for one flower for cutting, I recommend zinnias. This variety is called Cut and Come Again, and it's appropriately named because the more you cut it, the more flowers it produces. In fact, that's really true of this whole garden. And what could be better than a garden that just gets better and better the more you harvest it? I like to come out first thing in the morning when the dew is still on the flowers, there's moisture in the stems, and they're not under stress from the hot sun. I come out with a bucket. I like these French flower buckets because they hold the stems straight up, but an ordinary bucket would do as well. I fill it about halfway filled with water, so it isn't too heavy to carry. Slightly lukewarm, because they absorb water better that way. Now, I've already started at the house with some of these clethra, or summer sweet, beautifully fragrant shrub. With any shrub, you need to do something to the bottom of the stem to make it absorb water better. Some people mash them with a hammer. I think the best way is just to slit it with a knife or some scissors, like that, and then put it into water. Poppies have another special technique about them. They're going to droop their heads if I don't sear the stems with a match first. So I'm just going to go like this, and then put them in water. And that'll help a lot. Now, with most flowers, it's good to get them just as they're about to open or just barely fully open. Now, these zinnias have still nice, tight centers here. But gradually, they're going to start to form this thing that elongates into a cone. You see how these get bigger and bigger as the flower gets older? So it looks something like this. That's kind of interesting looking, but that ring of petals is very soon going to fall off, just leaving this seed cone here. When I pick a flower, I try to get as long a stem as possible. That gives me more options when I want to arrange them. I usually cut on an angle like this so that when it rests at the bottom of the bucket or in the vase, it won't be fully on the bottom and it'll absorb water better. Sometimes you can even go and recut this underwater in a sink filled with water, and it'll absorb it even better. I like to take the leaves off the bottom so they don't decay in the vase. When I arrange these back at the house, I'll use lukewarm water again. Now, some arrangers use all sorts of fancy formulas to preserve the life of the flowers, 2 tablespoons full of sugar and a Tylenol or whatever. Now, I just think that leads to more decay of the stems and the leaves. So I'll just maybe add a tiny bit of chlorine bleach, say at the ratio of 1 tablespoonful per gallon of water, but even that isn't necessary.
Barbara, that's a beautiful bouquet.
Thank you, Eliot. There's a little of everything in here. There's flowers from the perennial bed and some from the cutting garden and even some wild goldenrod that's blooming now. What can you say about flowers like these?
They speak for themselves.
Well, let's let them do the talking.
And so for now, goodbye and good gardening.
Next on TLC, get started on easy home projects